Good afternoon. It's Monday, the 21st of November 2016, just after 1 o'clock. Welcome to UK Column News. I'm your host, Brian Girish. With me in the studio, of course, Mike Robinson. And a brief comment on the weather, because people are saying basically torrential rain, floods, dark, cold, dingy. And although it's brightening up in Plymouth, we know that in other parts of the country it's still pretty unpleasant. So thoughts go out to anybody who's suffered from flooding. Certainly there's been some problems in the Plymouth area over the last 24 hours, and you were a bit delayed coming in this morning, Mike.
It's appalling, yes. So we'll get straight on. Over the weekend, of course, on Better News, we had the conference in Winchester. I'm sorry about this photograph. It's from a pretty bad angle, but just short of 500 people attending. Absolutely fantastic turnout. Everybody really enthusiastic. Just to give a better perspective on this was from first thing in the morning before we started.
People arriving in this photograph.
Fantastic hall in Guildhall in Winchester, of course, the ancient capital of England, and it ended up the main room full and the balcony mostly full as well. So it was fantastic.
It was indeed. And very interesting to see how the various talks all came together. We weren't greatly prescriptive about what people were saying. We encouraged people to go with what they thought were the key issues, but the whole programme slotted together. And of course, we started off with a detailed look at our constitution and the formation of our laws. That was given by John Bingley. A lot of compliments about that opening talk. We discussed the money situation, the Bank of International Settlements, money created from nothing. And of course, at the moment, money, or the lack of money, supposedly, is the big problem in UK. Vanessa Beeley gave an excellent talk on events in Syria, another one of Britain's unlawful wars, of course. We discussed the NHS. We discussed common purpose. And we ended the day on an extremely high note with a look at nation states and the Westphalian Order, which was done by our very own Alex Thompson. And the final speaker was David Scott, and he was looking at what it means to be British. And at one stage, we had all of the people in that hall standing and singing, which was really quite exceptional. And what can we say? People afterwards simply coming up to us and saying, thank goodness that something has started to happen, and that somebody is now really pointing a finger at what the problems are in UK and what we can do about it.
Now, the aim now is to get the BCG. Justin is going to be getting the groups which have started to form, give them a bit of assistance over Christmas and the New Year. And then there's going to be a follow-up conference on the 4th of March, and Nottingham is the destination for that one. So we will no doubt hear details from Justin very soon about exactly what the format of that and the exact location.
Indeed. And a formal statement made by the conference, which really encapsulates all of the problems and the criminality going on in UK at the moment. So a line literally drawn in the sand, and we will be making that statement available to as many people as possible, because this really gives us a foundation now to say to the criminal element of the British government, things have got to change.
Right. The panic over so-called fake news continues. New York Times here, just wanted to highlight this. Quit social media, your career may depend on it. So the threats are starting to come out. If you're using social media, be very careful what you're doing, because perhaps your career may not survive it.
Yeah, it's puzzling, isn't it, Mike, that we've had year after year after year after year of being encouraged to get on social media. And we've got MPs that, instead of talking to their constituents, use social media to tweet and Twitter supposedly what's happening. And now all of a sudden we've got this amazing intake of breath, and whoa, you don't want to go near social media.
Indeed. So this is a blog saying that the writer claims to be a millennial computer scientist who writes books and runs a blog. Demographically speaking, he says he should be a heavy social media user, but that's not the case. He's never had a social media account, and he talks about how it can hurt your career. he says that the idea that if you engage in enough of low value activity, it somehow adds up to something of high value in your career. So these are the sort of underlying concerns, and of course, suggesting that if everyone with a Facebook account and a smartphone now feels pressured to run their own high-stress, one-person media operation, the once imaginable pace of the professional blogger is now the default for everyone, he's saying. And of course, that really is the undertone of the entire thing, a concern about news being produced via social media.
Yeah.
I would say that perhaps if the mainstream media wasn't providing such a vacuum at the moment, perhaps that's where they should be looking.
Yeah, but I mean, how is Theresa May going to conduct business without the Conservative Party central office tweeting out what supposedly government policy is? I mean, how's this going to work? Because we've got Twitter pages for every MP, and apparently they're conducting their business on Twitter. So they're going to be tweeting out, but we're not allowed to go and read those tweets. This sounds pretty good to me, because if we can stop the MPs from peddling their complete nonsense, I think we'll be heading in the right direction.
Now, of course, the other sword in the armory of real news, allegedly, if you follow what the mainstream says, anyone politicians say, are the fact-checking organizations, because, of course, they debunk everything that so-called fake news people push out. And one of the key ones in Britain, at least, is Full Fact, although they intend to be a bit more than key in Britain because they intend to head across the Atlantic as well. Full Fact, they say, is the UK's independent fact-checking charity. Well, they, in fact, are receiving a bit of a boost from Google. Here they are. This is the Innovation Fund, Google's Digital News Innovation Fund.
Isn't that social media?
No. This is all about making sure that real news, in inverted commas, gets pushed forward, whereas all this nasty fake news gets held back. So Full Fact is going to be receiving a grant from Google. Now, what they say is that it can't be too big a grant because they don't want more than 15% of their total budget coming from any one source. So it's not going to be too big a grant. So what's this all about? Well, they are going to automate fact-checking. They're going to turn it into algorithms. Those algorithms are going to automatically check facts. But so this is Will Moy, head of Full Fact, and he says that basically some types of claims could be handled as easily as a spell check, and including claims that were fact-checked by human beings before. But he said, don't worry, because there's still going to have some kind of human interaction, because some claims will always require human judgment, for example, about what's fair and balanced way of expressing things, or what methods of analysis could be applied to answer a question about crime. So we don't need to worry, Brian, because Full Fact is on the case. They're receiving Google money to be on the case. They're going to automate their fact-checking, but they're going to make sure there's a human eye on it at the end of the day, because they've got to make sure that everything is fair and balanced.
Yeah. So this is Will Moy, who is nobody really. He's just a young man that's suddenly come into the domain, but of course had a huge boost from the Media Standards Trust. That brings us into the common purpose realms. And David Bell, who we now know is tied into organisations with sort of links into what's happening in Syria. So who is this young man, and why should we believe a word he says?
Well, this was him, in fact. This images of him from the Leveson inquiry, where he was sitting beside the representative of the Media Standards Trust, whose name escapes me just at the moment. But what fascinates me about Will Moy is he absolutely has Tony Blair eyes, and we'll be mentioning Tony shortly.
Yeah. Well, one thing that Full Fact won't be talking about is anything to do with child abuse, because they don't really want to go near the subject, never mind check whether what's published is accurate. But The Independent has finally pushed the truth out. This is incredible, because here they are. They're now using the term cover-up. Theresa May accused of cover-up over child abuse inquiry concerns. So the truth is, it is a cover-up, but if people are asking why, what they are looking to do is to cover up child abuse by members of Parliament. Now, this is not only historic, this is the nature of the beast. And let's bring a little piece of it home here, because we've shown this many times before. But if you haven't seen it, go on to YouTube. Oh, that's social media, is it?
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll need to get rid of this, because if you go onto the social media, you'll see the BBC, which of course is approved government media, but doing a video interview with a man called Tim Fortescue, who was a whip in the Conservative government 1970 to 1973. And what he says to camera is that MPs came to the whips when they had a problem. It could be any sort of scandal, it could be money, it could be, quote, small boys, and we helped them because once we'd done that, they would, quote, do as we asked. So this man is describing to camera, without any qualms, no squeamishness about it, he describes to camera that the Conservative Party was prepared to use child abuse as a means of blackmailing MPs, because that's what he's talking about, is blackmailing. So after our conference on Saturday, I was contacted by a gentleman who said, Brian, are you aware of this one? Now, this is part of the Sunday Telegraph, and the article we're looking at is their Chief Whip's web-based way of intimidating unruly MPs. And what is this all about? Well, it's about a gentleman called Gavin Williamson, who's now the senior whip for Theresa May. He's only been in Parliament for 6 years. He comes in, fresh face. He's now a whip. I wonder whether he's using a little bit of pressure to make sure MPs do as they're told. But he keeps a tarantula on his desk in a glass cage. He's named it Cronus, and according to this article, that's named after the Greek god who came to power by castrating his own father before eating his own children to ensure they wouldn't oust him. And this was dubbed a novel take on the Little Black Book by one Tory MP. So we've got immature MPs regarding a man who thinks that he should have a tarantula, which apparently many the MPs are extremely scared of.
I mean, this has got to be seen as a threat.
It's a threat, but it's perverse, isn't it? We're naming it after somebody who castrates his own father and eats children. Yeah. So we called Gavin Williamson's office this morning, and we asked for some comment on this. We also asked for a copy of his terms of reference as a whip, because of course we're interested to see if in the terms of reference, which he presumably has had from Theresa May, there are instructions as to how to pressurise and bully MPs to do what? Cover up the child abuse inquiry, maybe. Well, if you would like to follow through on this young gentleman, here he is. This is Conservative Home talking about their own, and they're calling him a baby-faced assassin. So this is a deep look into Conservative politics. So this young man with very strange eyes comes out of nowhere, talks about gods castrating their fathers and eating children, and this is the man who's being put in control of MPs. Well, it doesn't take much to see what's going on here, because the Mail reported this article, Chief Whip in top Tory gay smear, Theresa May's, quote, enforcer made an outrageous claim that an ex-minister cheated on his wife with another man. Now, was this actually a mistake, or was this a warning of what would happen if the individual did not toe the Remain party line? Because apparently this person was a prominent Leave campaigner. So who do you think this young man is, Mike? He's there's something particularly nasty about him.
Yeah, this isn't nice.
It's not nice. Well, always go and have a look at social media, because you can find a lot out on social media, which is presumably why the government wants to shut it down. But here's Gavin Williamson. He's only put out 804 tweets, but he's apparently got over 6,000 followers. Presumably some of those will be machines, I'm not sure. But of course, if you read his Twitter page, which is all about cricket in the English countryside, he's such a nice man. He's been visiting all the little girls at school. Presumably he didn't take his pet spider with him. And he's also very big on the Owl Trust. Right. So I thought maybe he was a friend of local Plymouth MP Oliver Colville. And never mind the starving, never mind the state of the nation or the fact we don't have a Royal Navy anymore. Let's concentrate on the owls and the hedgehogs, and presumably we're going to have a tarantula preservation society.
Okay, if you're squeamish, look away now, because we're about to bring Tony Blair on screen. Here he is. Now, looking back a couple of months, on the 21st of September this year, we pointed out that he had closed Tony Blair Associates. He was clearly making a career change. So he was reported to be closing his commercial enterprises, and he was supposedly going to be focusing on not-for-profit activities. So he had announced to his staff that, quote, I want now to concentrate the vast bulk of my time on the not-for-profit work that we do. De facto, this has been the case in the past 2 years, but we need to reflect this change in the way we're structured. To this end, we're going to make the following changes. We will close down Tony Blair Associates and wind up the Far Rush and Windrush structures. I will retain a small number of personal consultancies for my income, but 80% of my time will be pro bono on the not-for-profit side. That's what he was saying on the 21st of September. And of course, this particular quote on screen at the moment came from October the 28th, which we reported at the time, when he waded into the Brexit debate. And of course, there were rumours at the time that he was going to be getting back into British politics. So he's wound up his commercial interests mainly. It now looks like he's getting into British politics once again. He said at the time, we're the insurgents now, speaking about the Remain side of the Brexit argument. And he said that surely we are entitled, that's the Remainers, are entitled to try to persuade, to make the argument and to not be whipped into line to support a decision we genuinely believe is a catastrophe for the country we love. So he's now, having been one of the arch whippers in the S&M club that the Parliament is. Am I allowed to say that?
I think you've just said it, Mike, actually.
Okay. Well, anyway, he has whipped so many in his time, but he doesn't want to be whipped anymore. But the Times over the weekend telling us that, the Prime Minister, according to Blair, is lightweight and Corbyn's a nutter. So Blair is back.
Well, that's reassuring, isn't it?
It is, because for Tony Blair to be saying anybody's a nutter has got to be the most obtuse case of hypocrisy I've ever come across. But anyway, that's what he said. So Sunday Times saying he's back. But if we look around I haven't put graphics for this in, but if we look around the headlines, well, the Mail was saying Blair to continue to speak out on Brexit. The BBC saying Blair's office denies Brexit campaign report. The National said Blair seeks Brexit return. The Metro said Blair's return to politics. ITV News said Blair and Trump, the next special relationship. And the Telegraph said Blair dismisses Trump relationship as beyond speculation. So it's pretty unclear what the situation is at the moment. What we can say is that, as we reported a couple of months ago, he has wound up his commercial interests. He says he's getting into pro bono, not-for-profit work. Does that mean that he's just going to snipe into British politics from the background? He's just going to spend his time, maybe he's going to be on social media?
Well, that'd be shocking, because we'd have to get him full fact checked.
Yes. So anyway, maybe he's worried about that Trump is actually going to follow through on reforms. So this is the Telegraph over the weekend, worrying that Trump is going to actually implement Glass-Steagall. Headline, will Trump back reform on finance or keep the status quo? They're saying that Trump is already committed to overturning the Dodd-Frank Act, which is the half-hearted attempt at dealing with banks. They're asking the question, will he go further and realise his campaign pledge to adopt Glass-Steagall? Donald Trump himself was, they say, at one point saying he would scrap Dodd-Frank, but then saying he would introduce Glass-Steagall, which was repealed under Bill Clinton's presidency. He may consider it politically unwise to allow the banking industry to return to the casino-like excesses which led to the crash. Reintroducing Glass-Steagall, banning commercial banks from making high-risk investments could set the tone for a rather more populist streak than the Republican establishment would like. So he would like to see the big banks broken up. Well, I think we all would. And they quoted Aaron Klein, a fellow at the Brookings Institute, as saying, it's as if two Donald Trumps went to the woods and diverged. What he could do is embrace ideas and have support at both ends of the political spectrum, such as bringing back Glass-Steagall. Well, we wait and see whether he does. I hope he does.
It's pretty interesting to watch this lot unfold, isn't it? What Trump is and what he's really going to do. We haven't quite seen yet, but I think it's not going to be long before we can understand that.
Yeah. Now, Ian Crane, I'm glad to say, is in the studio tonight. We announced that he would be last week, but unfortunately he was ill. But he was in Winchester on Sunday, and we did speak to him. So I'm glad to say he's feeling a lot better. And so 7:30 p.m. On the live stream tonight, Humanity versus Insanity, and at 9 p.m. for Fracking Nightmare. And I think this is episode 97 or 9. I think this is episode 98 of Fracking Nightmare. Only 3 to go to the 100. It's amazing. Which
will definitely have to be a celebration of some form.
Yes.
So we'll see what can be done for that.
Indeed. Right. Well, Bernard Hogan Howe in the Mail over the weekend or at the end of last week. Let's make arrests more secretive is the headline. Says Met chief critics warn will become like a banana republic if plans are introduced. So what's he saying? The police would only confirm that an arrest would be made. They wouldn't admit who had been arrested. They wouldn't say where they'd been taken. They wouldn't give any other details. But this was the other interesting aspect of this. He also called for a law to restrict, quotes, investigative journalism. I mean, that is spectacular. What are these guys scared of?
They're scared of the
Everything.
truth.
Yes.
They are scared of the truth, and they're scared of exposure. And that was one of the reasons why those two particular weapons were highlighted at the Winchester conference. People say, what can we do? How do we stop this? It is always the same to truth and exposure, because these people are terrified that when millions of people can see clearly what they're doing, the game is all over. It's truth and exposure.
Right. So here's what he had to say. My feeling is to release no details. We've arrested a man and that's it. That's all they give. But it's okay, Brian. We don't need to worry about this, because he also said suspects are not held in secret because there are lawyers and there's CCTV.
Well, CCTV where the footage disappears, where somebody's been beaten up or assaulted in the cell. And of course, the people who are actually looking after many people who've been arrested are not even police. They're private security, and you don't even know the names or indeed sometimes which company they're working for. The Mail being particularly disingenuous in that report, because it uses the term banana republic. No, what we're talking about is a vicious police state, which means secret arrests. It means people being beaten up or indeed dying in custody. And of course, it means a complete cover-up by the police, because already at the moment there is no proper independent investigation of any actions by the police. IPCC is, of course, a joke. And if we go north of the border, we haven't even got separation of powers between the police, the judiciary, and the political mafia around the Scottish National Party. So this is dangerous stuff.
Yes. So just before we move on from this, I'm just going to put this back up on screen, because what he's saying is that suspects are not held in secret because there are lawyers and there's CCTV. It doesn't matter that they've been lifted off the streets, that nobody knows where they are, that they're not naming anybody that's been taken into custody. People just disappear. Let's just go back to full fact for a second, because if we remember when Roger Hayes was taken to court and committed to prison, that court case was not listed.
No.
And we alleged at the time that was therefore a secret court case. And Full Fact pulled us up on this. And you can see the article that we wrote in rebuttal on the UK Column website if you have a look for it. But Full Fact told us that it was not a secret court case because it happened in a British court, effectively, is what they were saying.
Yeah, they hadn't attended the court case.
No.
They simply commented on it from a distance.
And in fact, nobody in the public had attended the court case because nobody knew it was happening, because it wasn't listed in the court lists. Therefore, it was secret.
Yeah.
So this is pretty dangerous. Hogan Howe wanting to take that a step further.
Okay. Well, we're now starting to see the beast for what it is. You have to have control of the media, because otherwise the criminality and the treason that's being carried out in the UK at the moment might be seen by somebody. So let's have a look at part of what we would describe as treason, which is the utter decimation of the Royal Navy. Now, this was reported a few days ago that there was going to be no more surface-to-surface missiles for the Royal Navy for perhaps 10 years. And the inference was the Navy would have to rely on guns. Well, this is complete nonsense, because this means that the Royal Navy would simply have no weapons for power projection, is what we'll call it, but they would have no proper weapons to fight a war at sea. We'd like to add that, of course, it's not just missiles. We've got no missiles. We've got no maritime patrol aircraft, no aircraft carriers that are operational, no aircraft to go on those carriers, no flight deck crews, no engineers. And we also know that the helicopter-launched air-to-surface missiles are also going to be withdrawn. So effectively, the helicopters that are based on frigates, for example, they can be used for reconnaissance, they can be used for anti-submarine warfare, but that's as far as it goes. So,
and the other thing to point out here is that, of course, the frigate fleet, which is aging, is supposed to be being replaced. So each year for the next number of years, they're going to retire one frigate, and they're supposed to put a new frigate in service to replace it.
And that's not going to happen.
Where are they?
Well, they aren't there, and it's taken the Sun to produce the proper headline. What do we do with a shrunken Navy? Royal Navy has been reduced to a historic low number of warships and is, quote, unable to combat global threats. It isn't a question of unable to combat global threats. The Royal Navy is unable to defend the United Kingdom, and therefore this is a deliberate calculation by the Conservative government, principally under David Cameron, although Tony Blair was bringing in the policy. Royal Navy to be reduced to a shell in order to ensure that the British military would be locked into the EU military vehicle. And of course, it's been Strategic Defence Initiatives, David Ellis, who's been reporting on UK column about this very fact. And we can see at the moment that Defence Secretary Michael Fallon absolutely continuing the path to lock British military into the EU military system, and with it will come the full procurement system. Britain is not going to be allowed to produce any significant military equipment. We're going to be dependent on foreign nations to do that, principally through the EU. And this massive industrial military complex in Europe will require its own treasury. So we know exactly what's going to happen, and we know how it's going to be done. This is treason. We're watching it step by step. Let's close down social media so that people don't pick up on what's going on. And if we can really force this home, well, I can't really describe this after spending 21 years in the Royal Navy when it was capable of doing the job. It says maritime standoff as Royal Navy patrol boat fires flares to warn a Spanish research vessel after it carried out dangerous manoeuvres on the Bay of Gibraltar. What it was doing was it was being a little bit naughty with whose water is who. Was it dangerous? I don't think so. It's just a survey vessel playing games. But if you can't see the British warship in the picture, I'm going to help you out because it's here. Now, this is not a radio-controlled model. I'd like to stress this. This is apparently a warship. It's HMS Sabre. This is slightly bigger than 18 inches, but apparently not much, Mike. And I have not doctored the picture. This is from the Daily Mail. So I've said here clearly this is not a radio-controlled model. This is Royal Navy warship, which has fired flares. That's pretty frightening stuff. And why are we in this pitiable position? Because, of course, these politicians utterly betraying the nation in order to ensure that we're fully locked into the European Union. So Brexit, of course, is a complete lie. And what is the whole European agenda predicated upon? Well, we've got no money. So bring in the banks.
Over the last few days, RBS in the news quite a bit. So we're worried about Deutsche Bank getting fined $12 billion by the United States for mis-selling. 14 million pounds in Deutsche Bank's case. 12 million pounds looks like what it's going to be for RBS. So this is over these mortgage-backed securities, and not really clear exactly how much it's going to be. It could be 5 billion, could be 12 billion. They're certainly setting aside quite a lot of money for this. And they're also setting aside a further 3.8 billion to cover aspects of other residential mortgage-backed security misdemeanors, as they're being described. They're being called misdemeanors.
Yeah.
They're not felonies. That's a bit strange. But anyway, I thought fraud was a felony. But anyway, on we go. Litigation on mortgage-backed securities and investigations may require additional provisions in the future, they said, and the aggregate could be materially in excess of current provisions. Well, that's a shame. Well, as a result, then BNP Paribas downgraded RBS from neutral to underperform. Well, it's always amusing when one bank makes an assessment of another bank's situation. Sorry, the words escape me at the moment because this is just so laughable, the whole thing. But anyway, of course, there were suggestions that that the government would sell off its remaining stake in RBS as a result of all this. But in fact, the Treasury has said there's no way they're going to do that until after the amount is finally settled of a fine from the US Treasury. So the UK Treasury is saying they're not going to sell the shares. They're going to wait to see how much the US Treasury wants to take from RBS before they do that. So the Treasury Select Committee, this article saying that the Treasury Select Committee released correspondence from Tom Scholar, the Permanent Secretary of the Treasury, who said that it was entirely untrue and without foundation that the government was asking for information from the Financial Conduct Authority with reference to selling the shares. So RBS continues to bumble along the bottom. Of course, we own it. And of course, mortgage-backed securities and PPI mis-selling are not the only scandals, because they've got the whole global restructuring group issue to be resolved still. And we still wait to hear whether the Financial Conduct Authority will release their report on that before Christmas. I'm not holding my breath for it.
No, and I don't think we'll hold our breath for full fact to be chasing that to see whether it's true.
Indeed.
Well, let's come on to the subject of elderly people in the care system. And at the Winchester conference, Kay Woodward gave a very powerful talk about the abuse of particularly the elderly, but also vulnerable people in the NHS and the care system. And here we are with a Mail article, and we've got an elderly lady suffering from dementia. The family got very concerned about her treatment, and in particular bruises appearing on this very, very vulnerable lady. But what's happened is that as they have complained, they've now been shut out of the care system around her. So this lady is now effectively, this elderly lady is now effectively imprisoned by Hampshire County Council Social Services. They've gone through the Court of Protection, and they now control Peggy and her treatment and care.
So just to reiterate that, the relatives are banned from seeing this woman?
Not quite banned. I'll bring in this draconian restrictions. So basically the daughter said going to see Peggy is like a prison visit. It's been a living hell, yet we've done nothing wrong. The restrictions are vindictive. So these are restrictions on her visiting her mother. They've been imposed by the Court of Protection in collaboration with Hampshire County Council Social Care after the lady's daughter and her husband realised something was wrong. There were bruises appearing on her. They were very worried about her care. They moved her from around several care homes trying to get her proper care. And what happens is that the social services go to the Court of Protection, and that couple are now simply pushed to one side. And this is terrible, very, very sinister stuff, because, of course, they're worried about her, but they can't get near her. Who is also involved? Well, we've got the Quantum Group. And this, of course, was the very thing that Kay Woodward was warning the 500 people at the Winchester conference, is that you have got to pay attention to people inside the NHS on a day-by-day basis. Kay asked the question, why does the NHS want to know when you go into a hospital, for example, as an older person, if you own your own property. Why would that be? Kay warned the audience that with elderly people, you can easily be blocked if you have concerns and you raise those concerns with the social services or the care system. They retaliate by simply calling you vexatious, threatening, and you are blocked from contact with your relative. Well, we did a little bit of research this morning. We had a little look at Quantum Group. Nice, shiny website. It's making a difference, creating wonderful communities, and exceptional value is at the heart of what we do. How do we enrich lives? So this is all very nice stuff.
Well, it could be seen both ways because they're creating exceptional value. Who for? Their shareholders. Who are they enriching?
I think we're going to give a little clue as to that, Mike. So this is the sort of stuff. This isn't the care home that's at the centre of the problem at the moment, but they're boasting that they've built these fantastic care homes. And of course, this is done, quote, in partnership with the NHS. So we've got a private company in partnership with the NHS, but a private company that can also access the Court of Protection. Well, if you like to have a little look at their website yourself, you will find that everybody is connected with big money and profit-making companies. So we've got banking interests, we've got property interests, we've got hedge funds, we've got big accountancy firms, and as you'll see in a minute, we've also got solicitors. So don't believe what we're saying. Go and have a look at these people and see whether you get a good feeling that these are the right people to be looking after elderly and vulnerable people in care. We're quite interested with this gentleman because amongst his other interests, we see that he's chairman of the Dolphin Square Foundation, which I don't know how that ties in with care, but it's just something. And if we have a look at this man over here, then we're also got a gentleman who happens to be leader of Bournemouth Council. So we know that he sits on sits together with people from Hampshire County Council on many of the government bodies.
But this would be Bournemouth Council that has a social services department that's getting involved in care of the elderly. There's no conflict of interest there.
Well, I would say I believe there might be, but we need to do a little bit more research. But one minute you're a councillor and you're working with a council, and the next minute you're also sitting with what is a profit-making company, making a profit out of care provision, which technically the public sector is providing. It all gets a little bit complicated. And then we have this gentleman. He's part of the team as well. It says David has been practicing as a solicitor for over 30 years. And he's a member of STEP, STEP, Society of Trust and Estate Practitioners. And we just noted down the bottom that David has also conducted the sales of assisted living care flats and the part exchange of individuals' homes. So we've got a very, very interesting team, many of them involved in very big money. This is all about profit. This is about banking, corporations. Somehow they're in partnership with the public sector. But if you point a finger, you get banned from being near your relative, told to leave the property, and you have to sit on the sidelines and watch as what care fails. So interestingly enough, this was a very powerful talk at Winchester. We know from speaking to people after the event that many of them were absolutely shocked at what they started to hear. And believe me, that was only the tip of the iceberg. We're getting so much information about very vicious treatment of people within the NHS hospital and care system. We know this doesn't apply, of course, to all doctors and nurses, but what we are clearly seeing is that the Conservative government is rapidly privatising every aspect of care, so-called care, and many people still cannot see this happening. So we would say to you, watch this space with UK Column, because we're going to be doing a lot more evidence-based work on some of the despicable things happening within Theresa May's Conservative NHS care system. Well, a couple of pointers before we finish today. Firstly, we'd like to say thank you very much to everybody that has been donating over the past couple of weeks. And certainly the British Constitution Group had some generous donations yesterday. There were also donations given for John and Tina Hurst. And I'd like to say that John Hurst is due to appear in court in Builth Wells in Wales on Wednesday. So that's this coming Wednesday. I think the case is scheduled for 10:30. It's to do with council tax. But John Hurst could really do with good support, people on the ground to be in the court watching what's happening. And of course, ultimately, this is, of course, how justice should be working, where people can see justice being done. John needs your help. So if you're South Wales or Bristol area, or somewhere you can actually get up to that court hearing, please do attend. Tomorrow I will give you more detail of actual location. And would also like to say thank you very much to our Czech Republic viewers. We were told on Saturday that we've got people watching us from the Czech Republic, and indeed people from the Republic who are living in UK at the moment. It was great to meet you, and thank you very much for pointing us to the support that we've apparently got back in the Czech Republic. So there we are. And if you're not a subscriber to UK Column at the moment, please consider doing that. If you subscribe, if you donate, we can do what we do. We can't do it without your help. And I'm also going to say, if anybody would like to give Ian Crane some support by donations, this would be very welcome, as Ian has put a huge amount of work over the last year into helping to promote the campaign against fracking, bringing groups together. He's travelled huge distances around UK, and much of that, of course, requires money for petrol, fuel, staying at locations. And if anybody would like to give Ian some specific financial support through donations, it will be gratefully received, and we can
his website is ianrcrane.com.
Yeah, so either through Ian's website, or if you want to, provided you label it clearly, you can send it in via the UK Column. Well, that brings us to the end, Mike, I think. What an extraordinary situation. We can literally see UK being taken apart by a criminal government that is so terrified of the truth, it now wants a complete clampdown on media and investigative journalism. We'll be happy to continue to provide that service. Thanks for joining us. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.